Ryan Whitmore looked the CEO dead in the eyes and said it. Right there, in her elevator. Just the two of them. "How about a kiss for luck, Ms. Ashford?" The words left his mouth before his brain could stop them. His stomach hit the floor. 2 years of keeping his head down gone. One sentence. One stupid, reckless, sleep-deprived sentence, and his career was finished. He braced for ice, for silence, for security. Instead, Victoria Ashford lowered her tablet, turned to face him fully, stepped one step closer, and said something that stopped him cold. "Interesting, but tell me, how much more luck do you think you actually need? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because what happens next, nobody saw coming." The alarm didn't wake Ryan Whitmore that Tuesday morning. He was already awake. He'd been awake since 2:14 a.m., when Lily's coughing started, that deep rattling kind that made every parent's chest seize with helplessness. He'd carried her to the bathroom, run the hot shower to fill the room with steam, sat on the cold tile floor with her wrapped in a dinosaur blanket, her small head pressed against his chest, while she coughed and finally slowly fell back asleep around 4. He didn't sleep after that. He just sat there in the steam, back against the bathtub, listening to her breathe, making sure every breath came out clean, and even like a man waiting for a storm to pass. By 5:30, Ryan was in the kitchen. Coffee on, eggs cracking. The apartment quiet except for the hiss of the pan and the distant sound of early traffic 7 floors below. He moved through the kitchen the way men move when they've done the same thing alone for too many years, efficiently, without joy, without complaint. Not because he didn't love his life, he did. Every inch of it. But love and exhaustion aren't opposites. Sometimes they live right next to each other, pressed so close you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. He ate standing at the counter. He always ate standing. Sitting down felt like a luxury he hadn't quite earned yet. By 6, Lily was awake and already talking. Lily was always already talking. "Daddy, did you know that T-Rexes had really tiny arms, but their legs were super strong, like really super strong, so they could run even though their arms were useless?" "I did know that." "How do you know everything?" "I don't know everything. I just know dinosaur things." "Why?" "Because I have a daughter who's obsessed with dinosaurs." She climbed up onto the kitchen stool and accepted her eggs without looking at them. Her eyes were still soft with sleep, her hair a spectacular disaster. She had her mother's eyes. Ryan noticed it every single morning, and every single morning he said nothing about it. "My throat feels scratchy." "I know. You were up coughing last night." "Was I loud? Did I wake you?" He looked at her. 6 years old, and already worried about inconveniencing him. "No," he said. "You were quiet as a mouse." She seemed relieved. She ate a forkful of eggs. "Can I still go to school?" "You're going to school." "What if I get sicker?" "Mrs. Patterson has my number. She'll call me." Lily nodded seriously, like they'd just negotiated a contract. Ryan packed her bag water bottle inhaler in the small front pocket. The permission slip he'd almost forgotten 3 times, 2 crackers wrapped in a napkin, because she liked crackers, and helped her into her jacket. He walked down to the bus stop. He stood on the sidewalk in the November cold, while she climbed the steps, turned around at the top to wave at him with both hands, like she was flagging down an airplane, and disappeared inside. He watched the bus until it turned the corner. Then he turned around and started running. Ashford Technologies occupied 32 floors of one of the cleanest, most glass-heavy buildings in the city. From the outside it looked like ambition, made physical sharp angles, enormous windows, a lobby with ceilings so high they made you feel small before you even sat down. Which Ryan had always suspected was the point. He'd worked there for 2 years. In 2 years, not a single executive had learned his name. He wasn't bitter about it. That wasn't exactly the right word. He'd just learned to exist in a kind of deliberate invisibility, moving quickly, doing the job, staying out of the way of people who wore better suits and carried more important problems. Logistics assistant was his title. What that actually meant was, Ryan handled things that fell through the cracks. deliveries that didn't make it, shipments that got routed wrong, packages that were time-sensitive in a way that made someone in a corner office sweat. When those things happened, Ryan fixed them, quietly, without being thanked. He was good at it. He just wasn't sure it was enough. That morning, he was 20 minutes late before he even hit the lobby. The bus had been delayed, and he'd jogged 4 blocks in his work shoes, which were not jogging shoes, and he could already feel a blister forming on his right heel. He had a priority shipment to move from the loading dock on sub-level 2 to the executive floor before the 9 o'clock board prep meeting started. It was already 8:40. He punched through the side entrance, still breathing hard, and went straight for the service elevator, the wide, heavy one they used for cart deliveries. Out of service. He stared at the sign. Read it twice. Then he looked at the cart. 3 boxes. Time-sensitive documents sealed in delivery envelopes, a set of presentation materials, and something that had been labeled in someone's aggressive red marker, "Do not delay." He looked at his watch. 8:42. He looked at the executive elevator at the far end of the lobby. Every employee at Ashford Technologies knew 2 unwritten rules. Don't park in the reserved spots on level 3, and don't use the executive elevator. These weren't rules anyone had put in writing. They didn't need to. The culture enforced them the way all unspoken rules get enforced, through the slow, steady accumulation of looks and silences and stories that circulated in the break room about what happened to the guy who did that one time. Ryan grabbed the cart and pushed it toward the executive elevator. He didn't have time to care about unwritten rules. He hit the button. The doors opened immediately, smooth, silent, a different class of machine than the service elevator he was used to. The interior was all polished steel and soft recessed lighting. It smelled faintly of something expensive. He pushed the cart inside, pressed 32, and exhaled. The doors started to close. A hand stopped them. She stepped in without looking at him. That was the first thing Ryan noticed. She stepped in the way people step into rooms, when they're so used to those rooms belonging to them, that they don't bother checking first. She was already looking down at the tablet in her hand, her finger scrolling through something with the speed of someone who reads faster than most people think. Ryan had seen Victoria Ashford exactly twice before that morning. Once at a company-wide announcement in the main auditorium. She'd stood at the podium for 6 minutes, delivered numbers and targets with surgical precision, and walked off to polite applause. Once in a hallway on the 18th floor, where he'd been delivering something and had pressed himself to the wall as her entourage swept past. Up close, she was different from what he'd expected. She was younger than the photos suggested, early 40s maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a way that was practical rather than decorative. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, and her posture was the kind you develop not from confidence exactly, but from years of making yourself hold it together in rooms that were always watching. There were shadows under her eyes that no amount of competence could fully conceal. She looked, Ryan thought, like someone who hadn't slept much either. He recognized that look intimately. She finally glanced up, registered him, registered the cart, looked back at the tablet. The doors closed. Silence. Ryan stared straight ahead. The numbers climbed. The elevator was fast, another difference from the service model, and the ride to 32 would only take maybe 90 seconds. He just needed to survive 90 seconds without doing anything stupid. He made it to about 60. He couldn't explain it afterward in any way that fully made sense, not to himself, not to anyone. Maybe it was the sleep deprivation. Maybe it was the blister on his heel. Maybe it was 2 years of invisibility, suddenly compressing into a single moment and finding a release valve he hadn't planned on. Maybe it was that she looked tired in a way that reminded him of himself, and something about that recognition made her seem for one unguarded second like a person instead of a title. Whatever it was, he heard himself say, "Rough morning." She looked up, not with irritation exactly, more like surprise. Like she'd already processed that he was there and had filed him under background, and now background was generating sound. "Excuse me. Just you looked like you were having the same kind of morning I'm having. So." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the tablet. "I'm fine." "Right. Sure." Another silence. 4 more floors. And then he still couldn't fully account for it, he said. Maybe I need some extra luck today. How about a kiss for luck, Ms. Ashford? The words were out before his brain fully signed off on them. What happened in his body in the half-second that followed was something between freefall and a car crash. His stomach dropped. His jaw wanted to walk itself out of the building. 2 years of careful invisibility of keeping his head down and his mouth shut, and he had just said that. To the CEO. In her elevator. Alone. He braced. He waited for the ice. Victoria Ashford lowered the tablet very slowly. She turned to look at him fully for the first time, and something moved across her face, not anger, not the professional freeze he'd expected. Something smaller and stranger. She stepped 1 step closer. Interesting, she said quietly. Her voice was level, but there was something alive underneath it, something that hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. But tell me something first. He waited. How much more luck do you think you actually need? He didn't have an answer. His brain was still recovering from the shock of not being fired. The elevator stopped. 32. The doors slid open. Her assistant was already waiting in the hallway, tablet raised, schedule in hand. The world outside this small metal box, reassembling itself instantly. Victoria Ashford stepped forward. Paused at the threshold. She looked back at him over her shoulder just for a second, and there was something in that look that Ryan Whitmore would spend the next several days trying to accurately describe to himself and failing every time. Then she walked out. The doors closed. And Ryan stood alone in the elevator with his cart and his boxes, and the very clear sense that something had just happened that he didn't have a category for. He delivered the packages, signed the log, took the service stairs back down because the service elevator was still out and he didn't have the nerve to use the executive one twice in one morning. He ate lunch at his desk, a corner of the lower logistics office that smelled permanently of cardboard and printer toner. Ham sandwich, the last of the good mustard. He ate it while processing 3 rerouted deliveries and trying not to think about the elevator. He mostly failed. Marcus Webb, the other logistics assistant who shared the corner, dropped into his chair around noon with a box of leftover pad thai and the aggressive cheerfulness of a man who had no idea what had happened upstairs. You look weird. I'm fine. No, you look like somebody either promoted you or fired you, and you haven't figured out which yet. Neither. Then why do you look like that? Ryan considered telling him, decided against it. Marcus was a good guy. Genuinely good, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's birthday and organized the holiday potluck with terrifying efficiency. But Marcus also talked. Not maliciously, just freely the way some people do, and freely was not what this situation required. I had a weird morning, Ryan said. Define weird. Just weird. Marcus looked at him for another 3 seconds, clearly unsatisfied, then turned to his pad thai with a shrug. All right, man. Keep your weird. Ryan stared at his monitor, clicked through the delivery database, tried to locate the specific shelf in his brain where he kept things he wasn't going to think about and put the elevator there. The shelf didn't hold. He picked Lily up from the after-school program at 5:15. She ran at him the way she always ran at him, full speed, total commitment, like she hadn't quite figured out that collisions had consequences. He caught her. He always caught her. How's the throat? He asked, setting her down. Better. Mrs. Patterson gave me a lozenge. It tasted like fake cherries. That's what all lozenges taste like. Why don't they just taste like real cherries? Great question. I'll write a letter. To who? The lozenge people. She considered this very seriously. Okay, I'll sign it too. He helped her with her backpack. She told him at full volume and in extraordinary detail about everything that had happened at school. A disagreement about whose turn it was on the good swings, a science experiment involving vinegar and baking soda that had gone beautifully wrong, a new book in the classroom library about deep-sea creatures that she intended to read every single night until she had memorized it. Ryan listened to every word, not because he felt obligated to, because he genuinely wanted to, because after the kind of day he'd had, the kind of day that made him feel like a man moving through a world that didn't have a place marked for him. Lily's voice was a specific kind of medicine that nothing else replicated. They made dinner together. Pasta. She stirred the sauce. She took this responsibility very seriously. You have to keep stirring or it sticks. I know. I'm just reminding you. Thank you. That's what I'm here for. He bathed her, read to her 2 chapters of the deep-sea creature book, which she had already acquired because the school library had a lending program, and Lily had treated it like a military objective. He turned off her light, sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a moment, listening to her settle. Daddy. Yeah. Are you having a good week? He thought about the elevator, about those words. How much more luck do you think you need? Getting better, he said. Good. A pause. You work really hard. So do you. I'm 6. It's different. You study hard, you try hard, that counts. Another pause, longer this time. He thought she'd fallen asleep. Daddy, I think you're the best dad. He sat with that for a moment. Let it settle in the way good things need to settle, slowly, completely. Get some sleep, lily pad. Okay. Already drifting. Love you. Love you too. He sat in the hallway outside her room for a while after back against the wall, legs stretched across the narrow corridor. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm started and stopped 4 blocks away. He thought about what Lily had said. He thought about what Victoria Ashford had said. I thought about how strange it was that 2 women, one 6 years old, one running a billion-dollar company, had both in the same day made him feel something he didn't experience very often. Seen. He didn't see her the next day, or the day after that. By the 3rd morning, he'd mostly managed to file the elevator under extremely unusual thing that happened once and will not happen again, which was a file he'd used before and found reasonably reliable. I was in the middle of a delivery log dispute with a third-party carrier when Marcus looked up from his desk and went very still, in the way people go still when something unexpected appears in their peripheral vision. Ryan looked up. Victoria Ashford was walking through the lower logistics office. She was walking through the lower logistics office. Nobody walked through the lower logistics office unless they worked in the lower logistics office. Not senior managers. Not division heads. Certainly not the CEO. The lower logistics office was the kind of space that got forgotten in architectural planning. Fluorescent lighting, industrial shelving, a break area with a microwave that hadn't worked correctly since 2019. It was a functional space. It was not a visited space. The effect of her presence was immediate and total. 3 people stood up without meaning to. A 4th knocked over her coffee and didn't appear to notice. A manager Ryan barely knew materialized from somewhere near the supply closet, already talking, already selling. Victoria walked past all of them. She stopped at Ryan's desk. Still depending on luck. He stared at her for a half-second. Then something in him. The thing that had survived 2 years of invisibility, that had sat on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, holding a coughing child, that had eaten standing up at a kitchen counter for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to sit that thing straightened up. Only when the odds look good, he said. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something that was on its way to becoming one. I need to confirm a time-sensitive shipment. Your team handles priority ground logistics for the Northeast Corridor. That's us. Good. She set a folder on his desk, thin, clean, official. I need this reviewed by end of day, directly to me, not through channels. Okay. She held his gaze for a moment longer than the task required. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. And she walked out. The entire office watched her go. Then in unison they turned to look at Ryan. Marcus's mouth was open. Ryan picked up the folder, opened it, scanned the first page. It was a logistics review that absolutely could have been handled through channels. She came back the next week. Same reason, different pretext. A delivery routing question she could have emailed. A compliance confirmation she could have sent through her assistant. Each time she found him specifically. Each time she stayed slightly longer than the task required. Ryan wasn't naive. He knew what it looked like from the outside. He could feel Marcus watching, feel the subtle shift in how people moved around him. The slightly wider berth. The more careful looks. The conversations that paused a half-second when he walked by. He understood that proximity to power had a social gravity of its own, and that people were recalibrating their understanding of him in real time. That wasn't what he thought about, though. What he thought about was the way she talked when nobody else was listening. Because there was a difference. When other employees were nearby, Victoria Ashford was precise, efficient, authoritative. Every word, deliberate, every sentence, load-bearing. But when it was just the two of them, something loosened. Not by much, but enough. One afternoon she came by just before closing. Everyone else had left or was leaving, and she stood at the edge of his desk while he finished a rerouting report, and instead of delivering her pretext and leaving, she just didn't leave. "You always eat at your desk." He looked up. "How do you know that?" "I passed by on Tuesday around noon, and Thursday." "You passed by twice." "The logistics corridor is on the way to the archive floor." "It really isn't." She didn't respond to that immediately, but she didn't deny it either. "My office has a view of the whole city," she said instead. "I eat in there every day, by myself mostly." Most CEOs would call that a perk. Most CEOs would. He studied her for a moment. "But you don't." She was quiet. "What's it like?" he asked. "The office, the view." "It's beautiful." A pause. "It's very quiet." The way she said quiet, there was a whole separate sentence underneath it that she wasn't saying. Ryan heard it anyway. He'd gotten good at hearing the sentences people weren't saying. You had to when you were raising a child alone. You learned to listen for what the words were actually carrying. "My daughter says the same thing about her room," he said. "When she's upset, she says it's too quiet." Victoria looked at him. "How old is she?" 6. "Her name's Lily." "Is she?" A brief hesitation. Something she was deciding. "Is she the reason you know so much about dinosaurs?" He blinked. "How do you know about—" "You mentioned it in the elevator." He had. One sentence in passing. He was surprised she remembered. "She's obsessed," he said. "Has been since she was 3. We've watched every documentary. She has strong opinions about the KPG extinction event." "Which side does she come down on?" "She thinks the mammals got lucky." The almost smile again. "Smart girl. The smartest person I know." He said it without hesitation, without performance. And he watched something move across Victoria Ashford's face. Something unguarded and quick there and gone before she fully controlled it. "That's rare," she said. "Knowing exactly who the smartest person in your life is." "Not really. You just have to know where to look." She picked up the rerouting report he'd just finished. Set it back down. She wasn't looking at the report. "Lily's mother." She stopped. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't." "She died," Ryan said simply. 3 years ago. It's okay to ask." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Another silence. But this one was different from the silences before, less formal, less transactional. The kind of silence that happens between people who are actually in the same room instead of just occupying the same space. "Do you ever feel like—" Victoria started, then shook her head slightly. "Never mind." "No, say it." She seemed to reconsider. Then, "Do you ever feel like the role you're playing is so much bigger than you actually are, and you're just hoping nobody notices the gap?" Ryan sat back in his chair. "Every day," he said. She looked at him like he'd handed her something she'd been looking for. Marcus cornered him the following Friday at the coffee machine. "Okay, I need you to tell me what is actually happening." "Nothing is happening." "Ryan, the CEO of this company has been to this office 4 times in 8 days. She has spoken to you, specifically you, on 3 of those occasions. This morning I watched her laugh at something you said. She doesn't laugh. I have been at this company for 6 years. I have never seen that woman laugh." It was a mild chuckle. "It was a laugh, Ryan. We talk about logistics. Marcus stared at him with the expression of a man being asked to believe something his entire nervous system was rejecting. Logistics. Priority routing, carrier compliance, regional logistics frameworks. Are you in danger? What? Are you being used as some kind of corporate scapegoat situation? Is she being nice to you so she can fire you in a way that looks humane? Ryan couldn't help it. He laughed. Marcus pointed at him. That was also a laugh. You're both laughing now. This is unprecedented. Marcus. I just want you to be careful. And here Marcus's voice dropped the comedy because Marcus was actually a good friend underneath the theater of it. I'm serious. I like you. You've got Lily. You can't afford to get caught in something that goes sideways. Ryan nodded. I know. Do you? I thought about the way Victoria had said, it's very quiet. Thought about the look on her face when he'd told her Lily was the smartest person he knew. I'm not caught in anything, he said. He almost believed it. He started noticing things he hadn't noticed before. Victoria Ashford arrived at the building every morning at 7:12. Exactly. He knew this because the lobby coffee station was on his way in, and he'd started arriving earlier. Not because of her, he told himself, and almost believed it, and he kept seeing her cross the lobby at 7:12, already reading something, already moving at the pace of someone who didn't have a gear below fourth. She left after 8 p.m. consistently. The building's security log, which Ryan had access to as part of his logistics role, showed her badge scanning out between 8:15 and 8:40 every single night. 13-hour days, more on Fridays. He thought about that at home one evening while Lily explained at length and with visual aids she'd constructed from folded paper her theory about why Triceratops was actually the most underappreciated dinosaur in terms of cultural recognition. The T-Rex gets all the attention, Lily said, holding up her paper Triceratops. But Triceratops was actually really smart, and it protected its family. That sounds like someone I know, Ryan said. Lily looked at her paper dinosaur. Me? Yeah, she beamed. He thought about 13-hour days. He thought about eating lunch alone with a view of the whole city. He thought about the specific quality of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from working too hard with nobody to come home to. He understood that particular weight. It was the one he'd been carrying since the day he'd driven home from the hospital alone. He was in the middle of a carrier dispute that had been dragging on for 2 weeks when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Building extension he didn't recognize. He picked up. Ryan Whitmore. It's Victoria. He went still. In 2 years, he had never received a phone call from anyone above the director level. His phone had never once rung with a building extension he didn't recognize. Hi. I need to talk through the Northeast carrier situation. Do you have time? Yes. He minimized the dispute log on his screen. Now. If that works. That works. There was a pause. Then, in a slightly different register, how's Lily today? He had not expected that question. He sat back in his chair. Outside the logistics office window, the city was gold with late afternoon light, and for a reason, he couldn't fully articulate that question. 3 words completely ordinary asking about a 6-year-old girl's day felt like the most significant thing anyone had said to him in a very long time. Better, he said. She's been researching Triceratops. The underappreciated one. You remembered that. I remember things. He smiled, didn't hide it. She's good. She's really good. That's because of you, Victoria said quietly. He didn't answer right away. The afternoon light held. The city kept moving outside the window. The carrier situation, he finally said. Right. Back to business. But not quite all the way back. Not completely. Let's start with the Northeast Corridor breakdown. He opened the file. They talked for 40 minutes. The carrier situation took about 8 of them. That night after Lily was asleep. Ryan sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee he'd poured an hour ago and forgotten to drink. I was thinking about a conversation he'd had with his sister Dana 6 months after his wife died. Dana had driven 4 hours to sit in his kitchen and tell him with the directness of a woman who loved him too much to be soft about it, that he was allowed to be a person again someday. Not today, she'd said. Maybe not for a while, but someday. You're allowed to be more than just Lily's dad. He'd nodded. Said he understood. Put the thought on the shelf with everything else, and gone back to the business of surviving. That shelf had gotten heavy over 3 years. He thought about a woman who arrived at 7:12 and left at 8:40 and ate lunch alone with a beautiful, quiet view. He thought about her saying, "Do you ever feel like the role you're playing is so much bigger than you actually are?" He wrapped both hands around the cold mug of coffee. I didn't have a plan. He didn't have a category. He had a 6-year-old daughter and a blister on his heel, and 2 years of carefully maintained invisibility, and a brand new awareness that something in his chest had started waking up from a very long sleep. He didn't know what to do with that. He drank the cold coffee. He went to bed. He didn't sleep for a while. The Monday after Victoria Ashford walked through the lower logistics office for the 3rd time, Ryan arrived at work to find a voicemail on his desk phone. Not a message slipped under his keyboard. Not an email flagged through the system. An actual voicemail, which nobody under the age of 60 used anymore, which meant it came from someone who didn't want a digital trail. He played it with the volume low. "Ryan, it's Victoria. I'd like you to join me for a working lunch today. 12th floor conference room B, noon. If that doesn't work, call my direct line." She left a number. He sat there for a full minute staring at the phone like it might explain itself. Marcus walked in carrying 2 coffees and stopped when he saw Ryan's face. "What happened?" "Nothing." "That's not a nothing face, that's a something face." "I have a working lunch." "With who?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. Marcus set the coffees down very slowly, the way a man sets something down when he needs his hands free to process information. "Ryan? It's a logistics thing." "It is absolutely not a logistics thing." Marcus pulled up his chair and sat in it backwards, arms folded over the top. "Look at me. Look me in the eyes and tell me it's a logistics thing." Ryan looked at him, said nothing. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Okay. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to that lunch. You're going to be professional and careful, and you're going to remember that you have a daughter in the 1st grade who needs her father employed and functional. And then you're going to come back here and tell me everything." "It's a working lunch, Marcus. It's never just a working lunch, Ryan." He picked up his coffee. "It is never in the history of this company, or any company, ever just a working lunch." Ryan went to the working lunch. It was not just a working lunch. Conference room. B on the 12th floor was small by Ashford technology standards, a round table, 6 chairs, windows that looked out over the east side of the city. Victoria was already there when he arrived. Jacket-off sleeves rolled to the elbow, a spread of files open across the table, and 2 containers of food from the Good Thai place 3 blocks over. Not the company cafeteria. Not catered trays. The Good Thai place, which meant someone had gone out and gotten it specifically. "Close the door," she said without looking up. He closed it. "Sit anywhere." He sat across from her. She finished whatever she was reading, capped her pen, and looked at him directly. "I want to talk through something, and I need someone who will actually tell me the truth. Most people in this building tell me what they think I want to hear. It's exhausting." "Okay." The Northeast Logistics Restructure. The proposal on my desk right now would consolidate 3 regional hubs into 1 central processing center. The numbers make it look clean. I need to know what it actually does on the ground. Ryan had seen the proposal. Everyone in logistics had seen it. He'd had opinions about it for 3 weeks that he hadn't said out loud because nobody had asked him. "It creates a single point of failure," he said. "Right now, if one hub goes down, the other 2 absorb the volume. You consolidate, you lose that buffer. One bad winter storm in the wrong city, and you've got a 2-week backlog that affects every client in the corridor." Victoria looked at him. "The numbers are clean because they're not accounting for disruption costs," he continued. "They're modeling optimal conditions. Real logistics doesn't run on optimal conditions." "Who else knows this?" "Everyone who actually works in logistics. Nobody asked us." She picked up her pen, made a note. "What would you do instead?" "Consolidate the administrative overhead, not the physical hubs. Same cost savings on paper. You keep the redundancy built into the network. She wrote that down too. Then she pushed one of the Thai containers toward him. Eat. You haven't touched anything. I wasn't sure if this was... It's lunch, Ryan. Eat. He opened the container. Pad See Ew. His favorite, though he had no idea how she would know that. They worked through 3 more operational questions over the next 40 minutes. Real questions, specific ones. The kind that required actual knowledge of how the ground-level systems functioned, rather than how they looked in a quarterly presentation. Ryan answered all of them. He didn't soften anything. He didn't shape his answers toward what he thought she wanted to hear. He just told her what was true, and he watched her process it with the kind of focused attention that explained how she'd gotten where she was. At some point, the work questions stopped, and neither of them immediately introduced new ones. You went to college, she asked. 2 years, business administration. Then my wife got pregnant, and I needed to work full-time. Do you regret stopping? Some days. He considered it more carefully. Less than I used to. Why less? Because I figured out that what I'm good at doesn't come from a degree. It comes from paying attention, watching how things actually work instead of how they're supposed to work. You can't learn that in a classroom. No, she agreed. You can't. A pause. My father built this company from a regional carrier service, she said. 20 employees, 3 trucks. He knew every driver's name, every route, every client's birthday. When he died, it had 4,200 employees, and he still knew most of their names. She was looking at the files on the table, but not reading them. I've been trying to figure out ever since whether that's something you inherit or something you earn. What do you think? I think it's something you choose. She said it like it cost her something. Every single day, and some days are easier to choose it than others. Ryan thought about every morning with Lily. The alarm before sunrise, the eggs, the bus stop, the hand waving from the top of the steps. Yeah, he said. That's right. She looked at him across the table. Something in her expression had come unstuck from its usual position, the careful, controlled CEO calibrated expression that he'd seen in the lobby and the elevator and the logistics office. Underneath, it was something that looked, if he was reading it right, like someone who was extremely tired of carrying a very specific weight entirely alone. You're easy to talk to, she said. It came out like something she hadn't planned to say. I've been told that. He paused. Usually by my 6-year-old. The laugh came out of her before she could filter it. Not a mild chuckle. An actual laugh, surprised, genuine, 3 seconds long, and it changed her whole face, made her look like someone Ryan suspected she was underneath all the armor. She put her hand over her mouth like she was reining it back in. Sorry, she said. Don't be. It suits you. She looked at him. Not at the files, not at her phone, not at the wall, at him. I have a 3 o'clock, she said. But she didn't move. I should get back. Probably. Neither of them moved for another 10 seconds. Then Ryan stood, gathered his folder, and headed for the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. The consolidation proposal, he said. If you want the full ground-level analysis, I can write it up. Properly, with data. I'd like that. I'll have it to you by Friday. Thank you, Ryan. He opened the door, walked out, kept his pace even all the way to the stairwell where he stopped on the landing between 12 and 11 and stood very still for a moment with his hand on the railing. He was in serious trouble. He knew it the way you know weather is coming before the clouds show up in something physical, something that bypasses the reasoning brain entirely and just registers as fact. He took the stairs down slowly. When he got back to the logistics office, Marcus was on a call but watched him cross the room with the intensity of a man conducting surveillance. Ryan sat at his desk, opened his email, stared at the screen. Marcus ended his call, rolled his chair over, said nothing, just waited. It was a working lunch, Ryan said. Sure it was. We talked about the Northeast consolidation proposal. For 45 minutes. It's a complex proposal. Ryan. Marcus's voice dropped the irony completely. Are you okay? Ryan thought about that laugh, the way it had changed her face. The way she'd said you're easy to talk to, like she'd surprised herself saying it. I honestly don't know, he said. Marcus nodded slowly, rolled his chair back, picked up his phone, then set it back down and looked at Ryan with the directness of someone who'd decided that gentle wasn't going to cover it. She's the CEO, Ryan. I know. Of this company, the company you work for. I know. You have Lily. I know Marcus. I know. Ryan finally turned to look at him. I know all of it. Every single part of it. None of it is news to me. Marcus studied him. But. Ryan turned back to his screen. But nothing, he said. I'm writing a logistics analysis. He wrote the analysis. He sent it Friday morning direct to her email, comprehensive and precise, and grounded in real operational data. She replied within 20 minutes. 2 sentences. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you. He read it 4 times. He did not read it 4 times because of the professional validation. The following week, she called him again. Wednesday. Same direct line. Same unhurried way of getting to the actual point after a few minutes of work framing. They talked for an hour. At some point she mentioned that she hadn't eaten dinner yet. It was 7:40 in the evening, and he mentioned that he'd just put Lily to bed and was standing in the kitchen looking at an empty refrigerator, and somehow that parallel landed between them with a specific weight. You should eat, he said. You should too. I'm going to make eggs. At 7:40. Eggs are universal. They don't check the clock. A pause. He could hear her smiling, and he hadn't even seen it. I'm going to order something, she said. Good. Don't let me keep you from your eggs. You're not keeping me from anything. Another pause. Longer. Ryan. Yeah. Thank you for... She stopped, started again differently. These conversations, I don't have many of them, that are real. He leaned against the kitchen counter. The apartment was quiet around him, that specific late evening quiet that used to feel like loneliness, and had somehow in recent weeks started feeling like something else, like the pause between things rather than the absence of them. Me neither, he said honestly. That surprises me. Why? Because you're a small hesitation. You're very easy to be real with. He didn't have an answer for that. He didn't try to manufacture one. Eat something, he said finally. You too. He made the eggs. He ate them sitting down, which he realized halfway through was something he almost never did. He sat at the kitchen table and ate eggs at 7:45 on a Wednesday, and thought about a woman on the 32nd floor eating dinner alone in a big quiet office with a beautiful view of a city that probably looked very small from up there. He washed the plate, turned off the kitchen light, went to bed. He slept better than he had in months. What neither of them knew, what nobody in the lower logistics office or the executive floor or anywhere in between knew, was that someone had already started watching. Her name was Patricia Cho, and she'd been Victoria Ashford's personal assistant for 4 years. She was intelligent, deeply loyal, and extremely good at her job, which meant she was also extremely good at noticing things that other people missed. She'd noticed the detour to the logistics corridor. She'd noticed the direct calls from the private line. She'd noticed the way Victoria's schedule had developed a recurring 40-minute gap on Tuesdays and Thursdays that wasn't explained by any meeting on the official calendar. Patricia Cho did not dislike Ryan Whitmore. She didn't know him well enough to dislike him. What she did was her job, which was to protect Victoria Ashford from complications. And Ryan Whitmore, regardless of his character or intentions, was becoming a complication. She brought it up on a Friday morning while reviewing the week's schedule with Victoria. I've noticed you've been spending time with the logistics team. Victoria didn't look up from the report she was reading. The Northeast restructure requires ground-level input. Of course. A careful pause. Specifically with Ryan Whitmore. He has the most accurate operational picture of anyone in that department. Victoria. Patricia's voice stayed even professional. The board meets again in 3 weeks. Harrington has been asking questions. That made Victoria look up. What kind of questions? About your decision-making process. About whether the restructure delay indicates distraction at the leadership level. Another careful pause. He used that word, distraction. The air in the room shifted. Richard Harrington was the longest-serving member of the board and the most politically organized. He'd supported Victoria's appointment after her father's death, not because he believed in her, she'd always sensed, but because he'd calculated that he could manage her. The moment he stopped believing, that he would stop being an ally. Tell Harrington the restructure delay is due to a data quality issue that required direct operational review, Victoria said. That's accurate. It is accurate, Patricia agreed. But Ryan Whitmore isn't an operational reviewer. He's a logistics assistant. He's the most competent person I've talked to in that building in 6 months. That may well be true. Patricia set her tablet down. In 4 years, this was as close as she ever came to pushing back. But that's not how it reads, Victoria, and how things read matters. You know that better than anyone. Victoria held her assistant's gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the report. Thank you, Patricia. Patricia picked up her tablet. Board prep on Monday, 9 a.m. I'll be ready. The door closed. Victoria set the report down, stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city spread below her, millions of people moving through their days, invisible to each other, living in the gaps between all the things that were supposed to matter. She thought about a man who ate eggs at 7:45 at night because his daughter was asleep and he hadn't gotten around to dinner. Who sat on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning holding a sick child. Who'd looked at her across a conference table and told her the truth about a logistics proposal without once angling for credit or positioning for advancement. Who had made her laugh in a way she hadn't in she couldn't remember how long. She turned away from the window. She had a company to run. She had a board to manage. She had a reputation built over years of sacrifice that she could not afford to compromise. She sat back down at her desk. She did not call Ryan that evening. She'd decided she wouldn't, and she held the decision all the way through a 6-hour day that ended at 9:15, all the way through the car ride home, all the way up the elevator of her own building to her own apartment, which was large and tasteful and completely quiet. She made herself tea, stood at the window of her apartment. Different window, same city, same view of all those invisible people living their lives. Her phone was in her hand. She put it on the counter. She picked it up. She set it down again. She picked it up and called him. It rang twice. Hey. His voice was alert, not sleepy. She realized she had no idea what time it was. It's late, she said immediately. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. It's 10:15. I'm awake. What's wrong? The directness of it. What's wrong? Not, how can I help you? Ms. Ashford. Not, of course, no problem. Problem caught her completely off guard. Nothing's wrong. Then what's right? She stood at the window for a moment. The city lights spread out below her. She heard his breath on the other end of the line, steady and patient. I just needed to hear. She stopped, recalibrated. I wanted to check on the Friday delivery report. There was an anomaly in the Northeast numbers. Victoria. She closed her eyes. There's no anomaly in the Northeast numbers, he said. Not unkindly, just accurately. A long silence. No, she said. There isn't. Are you okay? She laughed short and slightly helpless. I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I'm always okay. That's not what I asked. She turned away from the window, sat down on the edge of her couch in the dark. I had a difficult conversation today, she said, about priorities, and how things appear versus how they actually are. Someone told you that talking to me looks bad. She didn't answer immediately. Ah, he said quietly. It's not, I don't think. You don't have to explain it. Ryan. No, I mean it. I understand. I'm a logistics assistant, Victoria. I understand how it looks. Something in how he said it. Not bitter, not wounded. Just plain and factual. The way a man states a thing he's already made peace with hit her somewhere specific. Don't do that, she said sharply. Do what? Reduce yourself to your job title. Don't do that. A pause. You know what I notice about you, she continued. You see everything clearly. Every system, every structure, every broken process. You look at a logistics proposal, and you see exactly what's wrong with it in 30 seconds. But when it comes to yourself, you accept the smallest version. Like it's been assigned to you, and you forgot you can argue. Silence on the line. Longer this time. That's a specific thing to notice, he said finally. I pay attention. I know you do. Another silence, but not empty. The kind of silence that happens when two people are standing on the same piece of ground, and both of them know it. My daughter told me last week that I'm the best dad, he said. His voice was slightly different, more careful. And I sat with that for a while, because I've been thinking of myself as this I don't know, incomplete version of what I'm supposed to be. But she doesn't see incomplete. She just sees her dad. That's because she's right and you're wrong. He made a sound, not quite a laugh, something closer to relief. How is she? Victoria asked. Asleep. She made me quiz her on prehistoric marine reptiles after dinner. I am now aware that there is a specific difference between a plesiosaur and a pliosaur, and it matters a great deal. Does it? According to my daughter, absolutely. Victoria smiled in the dark of her apartment. She didn't try to contain it this time. I should let you go, she said. You don't have to. I know. She stood, walked back toward the window. But I should. I'll see you Tuesday. Tuesday. A pause. Victoria. Yeah. For what it's worth. His voice was and unhurried. I don't think you're distracted. I think you're paying attention to things that actually matter. Those aren't the same thing. She stood at the window for a long time after they hung up. The city spread out below, her lit up and indifferent and beautiful. She thought about how she hadn't asked anyone's permission to call him. She thought about Patricia's careful voice and Harrington's careful word distraction and the entire architecture of expectation that had been built around her since the day she'd stepped into her father's role and decided she would be worthy of it no matter what it cost. She thought about what it cost. She went to bed. Tuesday came faster than either of them expected. She came by the logistics office at 4, same as before. He was at his desk. The office was mostly empty. Marcus had left at 3:30 for a doctor's appointment. The other two assistants were on the floor above sorting a misrouted shipment. It was just Ryan and the hum of the building settling into late afternoon. She sat in the chair across from his desk. Not in a supervisory way. In the way someone sits when they want to be in the same room. They talked for almost an hour. About the restructure. About a carrier contract she was reconsidering. About a management decision she'd made 6 months ago that she was starting to question. She asked his opinion on all of it and listened to every answer. Actually listened. Not the polite simulacrum of listening that most people performed, but real attention following up. Pushing back, changing her position when he gave her a reason to. At one point, he said something that made her laugh again. That real laugh, the unguarded one, and she didn't try to stop it this time. Just let it happen. She noticed that he noticed. You should do that more, he said. Laugh. Yeah. It's unprofessional. It's human. He said it matter-of-factly. There's a difference. She looked at him. Most people in this building wouldn't say that to me. Most people in this building are scared of you. And you're not. He thought about it genuinely, like it was an actual question worth considering. No, he said. I don't know. I'm something else, but it's not scared. Something in the room shifted. One of those invisible shifts that don't announce themselves, but that both people feel simultaneously, a change in atmospheric pressure, a step across some unmarked line. Victoria felt it. She saw that he felt it. For 3 long seconds, neither of them moved. Then her phone buzzed on the desk between them. She looked at the screen. Board notification. Harrington. The world outside reassembled itself. She stood, picked up the folder she'd brought down. Her professional composure settled back into place like a garment she'd learned to wear so well that she sometimes forgot it was a garment at all. I have to go, he said. It's okay. She moved toward the door, stopped. Ryan. He looked at her. Tuesday, she said. It wasn't a question. Tuesday, he confirmed. She left. He sat at his desk in the quiet office for a while after she was gone, thinking about a shift in atmospheric pressure and a phone buzzing at exactly the wrong moment, and the specific feeling of standing at the edge of something and not yet knowing whether it was a beginning or a drop. He gathered his things, checked the time. He had 40 minutes before Lily's pickup. He took the stairs. All 12 flights. He needed the time to think, and he needed his body moving while he did it. By the time he hit the lobby, he'd arrived at exactly one conclusion, that whatever was happening between him and Victoria Ashford was no longer something he could file under unusual thing that happened once. It was something else entirely. And somewhere between the 12th floor and the lobby, he'd stopped being afraid of that. He wasn't sure that was wise. He walked out into the late afternoon and turned toward the bus stop, and the city moved around him the way it always had. Vast, indifferent, full of people carrying their own invisible weight. And for the first time in a very long time, Ryan Whitmore walked through it, feeling like a man who occupied real space. Not background, not invisible. Present. Awake. Paying attention to something that was paying attention back. He picked up his daughter. She had opinions about pliosaurs. He listened to every word. The Wednesday it happened, Ryan had been running 4 minutes behind all morning. Not catastrophically late. Just that particular kind of behind that compounds the kind where you miss the express bus by 30 seconds and catch the local where the lobby security scanner decides. That's the morning to malfunction, where you step into the building already calculating how fast you can move between the loading dock and the executive floor before the 9 o'clock prep window closes. He had a priority card again. 3 sealed cases of presentation materials for a board preview session that the executive coordinator had flagged as time-critical in capital letters and 2 exclamation points. The service elevator was working today, but it was occupied. A maintenance crew had commandeered it for something on sub-level 3, and the wait indicator said 11 minutes. Ryan looked at the cart, looked at his watch, looked at the executive elevator. He pushed the cart toward it. The doors opened immediately, the same as last time. He got in, hit 32. The doors started to close. A hand stopped them. He almost smiled before he even saw her. Victoria stepped in. She was already in motion, tablet in one hand, phone pressed to her ear with the other mid-sentence, in a conversation that sounded like it had been going badly for some time. Tell Morrison that the timeline is not a suggestion. It's a condition of the contract. If he can't commit to the original delivery schedule, then we need to discuss whether he can commit to the contract at all. A pause. She listened. Her jaw tightened slightly. I don't care what his team projected. I care what was agreed to in writing. Get me the signed terms by noon. She lowered the phone, looked at the elevator interior, registered Ryan and the cart. Morrison, he asked quietly. Morrison, she confirmed in a tone that contained an entire biography of professional frustration. The carrier out of Cleveland. The carrier who told me 6 weeks ago his distribution network could handle a 20% volume increase and is now telling my operations team he needs a 60-day extension. He'll need more than 60 days. His hub infrastructure hasn't been upgraded since 2019. It's a capacity problem, not a scheduling problem. She looked at him sharply. How do you know that? Because I tried to route through his network 18 months ago and pulled back when I looked at his processing specs. The numbers don't support what he's been promising you. She stared at him for a moment. Then she turned and typed something rapid-fire into her tablet. Send me what you have on his infrastructure, everything. I'll have it to you in an hour. Thank you. The elevator climbed, 17, 18, 19. She lowered the tablet. And for just a moment, the CEO stepped back, and a person stepped forward, something Ryan had learned to recognize over the past few weeks, that small visible transition between the role and the human underneath it. How's Lily? She asked. She's been reading about ocean ecosystems now. We've moved on from prehistoric marine reptiles to current ones. An upgrade. She has opinions about the decline of coral reef populations. Very strong opinions. She made me watch a documentary about it twice. That sounds like the best possible use of an evening. He looked at her. She was watching the floor numbers climb, but she was smiling that real smile, the one she didn't produce for audiences. You look tired, he said. It came out before he could calibrate it. She glanced at him, not offended. More like someone who was tired of pretending not to be tired. I have a board preview at 9, a carrier dispute that's going to cost me the afternoon, and a proposal that was due yesterday, sitting on my desk, half finished. When did you eat last? What? Eat, food, when? A pause. I had coffee. That's not what I asked. She turned to look at him fully. There was something in her expression that he couldn't entirely read, something between exasperation and a kind of helpless gratitude, like a person who's been carrying something heavy for a long time and someone just offered to hold it for 30 seconds. Last night, she said. I had something last night. Victoria. I had a 7-hour day, and then a board call, and then I was reviewing Morrison's contract until midnight. I forgot. It happens. It shouldn't happen. Ryan. She said his name with a complicated mixture of warmth and warning. You can't. The elevator stopped. Not at 32. The floor indicator read 27, but the car had simply stopped. The lights flickered once held, then dropped to the emergency backup strip along the base of the walls, dim amber enough to see by, not enough to read by. A low mechanical groan from somewhere above them. Then silence. Victoria looked at the ceiling. Ryan looked at the panel. Hit 32. Nothing. Hit lobby. Nothing. Hit the door open button. Nothing. Found the emergency call button and pressed it, a distant buzzing somewhere below them in the building's mechanical system. Great, she said flatly. A recorded voice came through the panel speaker. A power interruption has been detected. Building maintenance has been notified. Elevators will resume operation once the issue is resolved. Please remain calm. How long does this usually take? Victoria asked. Depends on the fault. Could be 10 minutes. Could be 45. She looked at her phone. No signal inside the shaft. She lowered it. She pressed her back against the far wall of the elevator. Ryan did the same on the opposite side, close quarters, the cart between them. The amber emergency light making everything quieter and more immediate than it had any right to be. For about 30 seconds, they just existed in the situation. Then Victoria said, "Tell me something." What? Anything. Something real. I have been in meetings since 7 this morning, and everyone in every room has been performing. Just tell me something true. Ryan thought for a moment. I burned Lily's toast this morning, and she told me it was fine, even though it wasn't. She ate the whole piece. Victoria looked at him. She does that, he continued. Protects my feelings. She's 6. She shouldn't be protecting my feelings. She should be demanding better toast. But she decided it was fine because she didn't want me to feel bad. He shook his head slightly. Sometimes she makes me want to be a better person just so I deserve her. The elevator was quiet. My father used to do that, Victoria said. Her voice was different, stripped of its professional register down to something earlier and more basic. When I made mistakes running things under him early on, when I was still learning, he never made me feel incompetent. He just asked me what I learned, every time, no matter how bad the mistake. Sounds like he was a good man. I was the best person I knew. A pause. I've been trying to run his company the way he would have. I'm not always sure I'm succeeding. What would he think if he saw you right now? She considered it seriously. I think he'd tell me I work too much and eat too little, and I've forgotten that the point of building something isn't the building, it's the people inside it. She looked at the floor. He used to say a company is only as good as the ones you never see, the people nobody thinks to thank. Ryan was quiet. Like logistics assistants, she added. I was going to let that be subtle. She looked up at him. Something crossed her face, a kind of recognition, quick and layered, like she was seeing two things at once, and both of them were landing. He would have liked you, she said. Ryan didn't have an easy answer for that, so he didn't manufacture one. He let it sit between them the way it deserved to. Can I ask you something? He said after a moment. Yes. The night you called me about the phantom anomaly in the northeast numbers. She held his gaze, didn't flinch. Yes. What were you actually calling about? A long pause. The amber light hummed. Somewhere above them, the building's mechanical system made sounds of distant effort. "I'd had a hard day," she finally said. "And there was a very specific kind of quiet in my apartment. The kind that's too much. And the only person I wanted to talk to was you." Ryan didn't look away. "Why me?" "Because you're honest. Because you don't want anything from me. Because when you ask if I'm okay, you actually want to know." She crossed her arms, not defensively, more like holding herself steady. "Because for about 3 weeks you've been the only conversation I've had that felt like one, instead of a performance." He pushed off the wall slowly. The cart was still between them. He moved around it, not all the way across the elevator, not crowding the space, but no longer separated by it. Close enough that the amber light caught her face, clearly close enough that there was no pretense of distance anymore. "I need to say something," he said. "Okay. And I need you to let me finish before you give me the CEO answer." Her jaw shifted slightly. "What's the CEO answer?" "The one where you remind me of the org chart." She held his gaze, said nothing. That was yes. "Whatever this is," he said, "between us, these conversations, these calls, you coming down to the logistics office 4 times in 2 weeks. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what it is. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter to me." He watched her face. "But I also have a 6-year-old at home, who is the whole reason I keep myself in one piece. And I'm not going to do anything that makes my world unstable for her." He paused. "So if you need me to go back to being a name you don't know, I can do that. I've done it for 2 years. I'm good at it." Victoria stared at him. "But if you're asking me what I actually want..." He stopped. "I'm asking," she said immediately. No hesitation. He looked at her for a long moment. "I want to keep talking to you. Outside of pretexts and logistics reports and phantom northeast anomalies." She breathed in slowly. "That's complicated." "I know." "The board?" "I know." "My position?" "I know all of it, Victoria. I laid out every obstacle in my head at 11 o'clock last night while I was supposed to be sleeping. I know every reason this is complicated." He held her gaze. "I'm asking what you want. Not what you're allowed to want. What you actually want." The elevator was very quiet. "I don't remember the last time someone asked me that," she said. "I'm asking." She looked at him. Really looked, the kind of look that goes past the surface of a person and takes inventory of what's underneath. He let her. He had nothing to hide from it. "I want..." She stopped, tried again. "I want to not eat dinner alone every night. I want to laugh without catching myself. I want to talk to someone who sees me and not the title." Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. "I want to not feel like I'm running a marathon alone in a room full of people." "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. Okay. That's enough to start with." She looked at him like she didn't quite know what to do with someone who responded to vulnerability with that kind of unadorned steadiness, like she was waiting for the catch. "There's no catch," he said. "You just read my mind. You had the face." "What face?" "The waiting for the catch face. I've seen it before, usually in the mirror." Something released in her. Not completely. She wasn't a woman who let go of things completely. He was coming to understand. But enough. A degree of tension left her shoulders. Her expression settled into something that was neither the CEO nor the performance, but something much closer to a person. "Your daughter is very lucky," she said softly. "I'm the lucky one." She looked at him steadily. "How much more luck do you think you need?" He recognized his own words. Her words from the elevator 5 weeks ago, the first time everything changed. He felt the shape of the whole thing, from that ridiculous joke to this dim amber light, and it hit him somewhere deep and clean, the way certain moments do when you understand in real time that you will remember them. "I think," he said, "I'm doing all right on luck right now." The corner of her mouth moved. Not the careful, almost smile. The real one. And then she reached out and took his hand. Not dramatically. Not with any great declaration attached. She just reached out in the quiet amber light of a stopped elevator and took his hand, and he held it, and neither of them said anything about what it meant, because in that moment they both knew, and words would only have made it smaller. They stayed like that for another 4 minutes before the elevator shuddered back to life. The lights returned. The floor indicator resumed. The car climbed the remaining 5 floors to 32, with a normalcy so complete it felt almost absurd, like the building itself had forgotten what had just happened inside it. The doors opened. Patricia Cho was in the hallway with a tablet, and a face that said she'd been waiting with increasing anxiety for 11 minutes. "Victoria, I've been trying to reach—" She stopped. Her eyes went from Victoria to Ryan, to the cart, to their hands which were no longer touching, but the space between them told its own story. "Power failure," Victoria said smoothly. "We were between floors." Ryan kept the situation calm. She stepped forward into her professional day, collecting it around her like a coat. "Reschedule the 9 o'clock for 9:30 and tell Morrison's contact I want those signed terms before 11. "Of course." Patricia's voice was neutral, professional, but she looked at Ryan one more time before she fell into step behind Victoria. Ryan wheeled the cart out. A different assistant took it from him at the executive area reception desk. He pressed the call button for the elevator back down. He rode to the lobby alone. He walked back through the building to the logistics office, past the coffee station, past the security desk, past the people who didn't know his name, and the people who did, and he sat down at his desk and opened his monitor and pulled up the Morrison infrastructure file. He spent an hour compiling it. Clean-sourced, specific. He sent it to Victoria's direct email with a subject line that said, "Morrison, what you need to know." No other text. She replied in 12 minutes. "This is exactly what I needed. V." He looked at that V for a while. It was small. It was nothing. It was the CEO signing off on a logistics document. It was also something else, and they both knew it. Marcus came back from a floor pickup around 11 and dropped into his chair and looked at Ryan with the practiced assessment of a man who had spent 2 years reading his desk neighbor. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You look different." "I'm the same." "You are categorically not the same. Something happened." "I sent Victoria the Morrison infrastructure analysis. You're on a first-name basis." "Marcus, with the CEO Ryan. You just called the CEO by her first name without catching yourself." Ryan considered this. It slipped. Things that slip are things that are already true. Marcus leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he thought he understood about his morning. "Okay, I need you to listen to me as a friend, not as a coworker." "Okay. Is this a real thing, not a lunch thing, not a phone call thing, a real thing?" Ryan took a moment. Thought about a hand reaching across a quiet space. About a woman asking what he actually wanted and meaning it. "I think it's becoming one," he said. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Man. Yeah. How does she feel?" "Like someone who hasn't let herself feel things in a long time and is remembering how." Marcus nodded slowly. "And you?" "Like someone who forgot he was allowed to and is remembering the same thing." Lily. "Lily doesn't know anything about this, and it stays that way until there's something real to tell." "What counts as real?" Ryan thought about it. "Honestly, I think we're already there." Marcus looked at the ceiling, brought his gaze back down. "Okay, here's what I know. You are a good man. She is whatever she is. She's clearly not what everyone thinks she is. But Ryan," his voice dropped, "there are people in this building who are not going to like this. Not because of you, because of her. Because she's who she is, and some people have a lot invested in controlling who she is." "Harrington." Marcus blinked. "You know about Harrington?" "I know enough." "Then you know he's been on the board for 12 years, and he's never once supported something that didn't serve his agenda first." "I know." "And you know that if he decides you're a problem." "Marcus?" Ryan met his eyes. "I've been invisible in this building for 2 years. If someone comes after me, they're not going to find very much." He paused. "But if they come after her because of me, that's a different thing." Marcus studied him. "What are you going to do about that?" Ryan turned back to his monitor. I'm going to do my job extremely well, so that nobody can say anything about my performance. And the other thing, he opened the next file in the queue. I'm going to figure it out, he said. He figured it out in pieces over the following week. They were careful, not in a covert way, not in a way that felt like shame, but in a way that respected the reality they were both operating inside. She didn't come to the logistics office. He didn't use the executive elevator again. The phone calls continued every other evening, and they were the most real part of his day. He told her about Lily's most recent dinosaur development, an earnest research project on the dietary habits of ankylosaurs, presented to Ryan over dinner with visual aids. She told him about a board member who'd challenged her on a budget allocation, and how she'd handled it cleanly, directly, without apology, and the specific satisfaction of having the data to back every word. He told her about the day 3 years ago when he'd driven home from the hospital alone and sat in the parking lot of his apartment building for 45 minutes because he couldn't figure out how to go up there and start a new version of his life. She told him about the day after her father's funeral, when she'd gone into his office, sat at his desk, and understood for the first time that she was completely alone in the middle of the biggest thing she'd ever taken on. They compared those silences, his parking lot, her office, and found they were made of the same material. That specific weight of understanding that you are the only one left holding something and you have to hold it anyway. How did you start? He asked one night. After the parking lot. How did you make yourself go upstairs? Lily called me from inside the apartment. She'd woken up and she was scared because I wasn't there, and I got out of the car. She pulled you back. She always does. A pause. Ryan? Yeah. I want to meet her. He was quiet. I know that's I understand if that's too much, too fast. I'm not trying to. No, he said. It's not too much. He thought about it carefully. About Lily, and her protected feelings, and her hand waving you. She asked me once why I'd been smiling more. I told her I'd made a new friend at work. Silence on the line. What did she say? Victoria's voice was quieter now. She said, "Is your friend nice to you?" He paused. I told her yes. She said good because I deserved nice friends. He could hear that Victoria was not entirely steady on the other end of the call. 6 years old, she said. Smartest person I know. You've mentioned that. It keeps being true. She laughed, that real laugh, all the way through this time. No hand covering her mouth, no catching herself, and Ryan held the phone and listened to it and thought that this was a sound he could stand to hear for a very long time. He didn't say that, but he thought it. And then 11 days after the elevator, everything broke open. It started with a photograph. Ryan hadn't known anyone was in the hallway when the elevator opened on 32. The building was thick with people, it always was, but in the specific momentum of stepping out of a stopped elevator after 11 minutes, in the specific electricity of what had just happened in that small metal space he hadn't scanned. Neither had she. But someone had a phone, and they had it angled at the elevator doors at exactly the moment they opened. The photo wasn't dramatic. It didn't show anything explicit. It showed Victoria Ashford and a man no one immediately recognized stepping out of the executive elevator, and it showed clearly the way they were standing, the proximity of their hands, something in the angle of their bodies toward each other that told its own story without requiring a caption. By noon, it was in a group chat. By 3, it had reached someone who knew someone on the board. By 5 o'clock, Richard Harrington had called an emergency board consultation. Ryan was in the parking structure collecting his things for the day when Marcus called him. "Don't react," Marcus said immediately. "Just listen." Ryan stopped walking. "There's a photo circulating, from this morning, the elevator. It's vague, you can't tell what happened exactly, but it's going around and it's reached Harrington." Ryan stood very still. He's calling it a conflict of interest. He's going to the full board. He's saying she's compromised her professional judgment. She hasn't done anything wrong. I know that. You know that. Harrington knows that too. That's not the point. Marcus's voice was tight. The point is, he finally has something he can use. He's been looking for a way to undercut her since her father died. Ryan, he's going to use you to do it. Ryan stood in the parking structure with the phone pressed to his ear, and the specific stillness of a man who understands that the ground has shifted. "Does she know?" he asked. Patricia called her at 4:30. He thought about Victoria, about the board preview session, about Harrington's 12 years and his calculated patience and the word distraction spoken in a very careful voice. "Is she okay?" "I don't know. I don't have eyes on that floor." He thought about an elevator stopped in amber light, a hand reaching across a quiet space. The real laugh and the real question and the most honest conversation he'd had with anyone in 3 years. He thought about Lily asking, "Is your friend nice to you?" He thought about what it meant to care about someone's world enough to worry about being a problem in it. "Marcus," he said. "Yeah. Thank you for telling me." "Ryan." "I'm fine. I'll call you later." He hung up, stood in the structure for another minute. Then he walked to his car, got in, gripped the steering wheel, and sat there in the concrete quiet, while the reality of the situation assembled itself fully in his mind. All of it. Every piece, the board, and Harrington, and the photograph, and the org chart, and the 2 years of invisibility, and the 11 minutes in an amber-lit elevator, and a woman who said, "I want to not run a marathon alone in a room full of people." He sat there for a long time. Then he started the car. He had to pick up Lily. She was waiting for him at the after-school door. Same full-speed collision, same total commitment. And he held on to her a little longer than usual, enough that she leaned back and looked at his face with 6-year-old precision. "Are you okay, Daddy?" "Yeah, Lilypad, I'm great." She looked at him for another second, unconvinced. Then she took his hand, and they walked to the car, and she talked about the water cycle the whole way home, and Ryan listened, and drove, and held on to the sound of her voice, while his mind worked through what was coming and what he was going to do about it. By the time they reached the apartment, he'd decided. He didn't know yet exactly how it would go. He didn't have a script. He just knew one thing clearly, the same thing he always knew in the end, when things got hard enough to require it. He was not going to stay invisible. Not this time. Victoria's phone rang at 6:47 that evening. She was still at the office. She was always still at the office, but she wasn't working. She was sitting at her desk with a cold cup of tea and a very specific kind of stillness that people develop when they are thinking through something too large to think through quickly. She picked up on the second ring. "Ryan. Are you okay?" She closed her eyes. That was the first thing he asked. Not what happened. Not how bad is it. Not what does this mean for me. Are you okay? "I've been better," she said. "Tell me." She exhaled. "Patricia briefed me at 4:30. The photo is circulating at the board level. Harrington called an emergency consultation for tomorrow morning. He's framing it as a leadership integrity issue." She paused. His exact language, according to Patricia's source, was that I have allowed a personal entanglement to compromise my executive objectivity. Silence on Ryan's end. Not the silence of someone who didn't have anything to say, but of someone choosing what to say carefully. "Personal entanglement," he repeated. "That's the phrase. We held hands in an elevator for 4 minutes. I know. While we were trapped there. I know, Ryan. That's what he's calling a compromise of executive objectivity. That's what he's calling leverage." Her voice stayed even. She'd spent 2 hours getting it to even, and she was holding it there through discipline. Harrington doesn't actually care about the photograph. He cares that he finally has a narrative. Something he can take into that room and use to make the other board members nervous. And nervous board members do what nervous board members always do, they defer to whoever sounds the most certain. And that's him. That's always been him. She stood up, walked to the window, same city, same lights. "He's been waiting for something like this since my father died. He didn't believe I could hold this position without eventually making a mistake he could capitalize on. This isn't a mistake." "No," she said quietly. "It isn't. But that's almost beside the point." Another silence. "Victoria." His voice had shifted lower, more careful. "What are they asking you to do?" She'd been waiting for this question because it was the only question that mattered, and she'd been avoiding it for 2 hours. "The board wants distance," she said. Between me and anything that looks like this. Patricia says Harrington's opening position will be that I reassign you to a different division, officially for operational reasons. She heard him breathe. And if you don't agree, he said. Not a question. Then he widens the scope of the integrity review, brings in external auditors, makes it a formal governance matter. She pressed her palm flat against the window glass. It would take months to resolve, during which every decision I make gets scrutinized through the lens of whether I'm compromised. Every contract, every hire, every strategic call. He'd make it impossible to lead. So he's giving you a choice. He's giving me what he thinks is a choice. There's a version of this where I fight it. Take it to a vote. Make the case that what happened in that elevator was... She stopped. Was what? She turned away from the window. Was two people having an honest conversation, which should not require a defense. But it does. In front of that board with that man running the argument, yes, it does. She sat back down. Her voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not. And the thing I keep coming back to, Ryan, the thing I can't get past is that fighting it publicly means putting you in the middle of it. Your name, your job, your record. Everything Harrington touches he uses, and I will not... She stopped. I am not going to let him use you. The line was quiet for a long moment. You're trying to protect me, Ryan said. Yes? I know you don't need it. I'm doing it anyway. And there was something fierce in her voice now underneath the control. Something that had been pressing against the professionalism all evening, and was finally finding an edge. You have Lily. You have a job you're good at, and a life you've built from almost nothing, and I will not be the reason Richard Harrington gets to reach into that and cause damage. Victoria, let me finish. She pressed on before he could. I told Patricia that I would give my answer to the board tomorrow morning. I have tonight to decide what that answer is. A pause. And I need you to know whatever I decide, it's not because I think you were a mistake. Do you understand me? Not for 1 second. He was quiet. She waited. I understand, he said. And his voice carried something not hurt exactly. More like the sound of a man absorbing something difficult without letting it knock him over. How's Lily? She asked. The question came out before she could stop it. Asleep. I read her 2 chapters about the water cycle. Is the water cycle as compelling as the dinosaurs? According to Lily, they're related. Something about ancient precipitation patterns and why certain dinosaur populations had better access to fresh water. A pause that contained somehow a smile she couldn't see. She's going to be a scientist. She's going to be whatever she decides to be. Yeah. A beat. She asked about my friend from work again tonight. Victoria sat very still. I told her my friend was having a hard week, he continued. She said I should make her a card. She offered to draw a triceratops on it because in her opinion, and she's done extensive research, Triceratops was the most comforting dinosaur. Victoria's careful composure cracked. Not completely, but enough that she had to press her hand to her mouth for a moment before she trusted her voice. She's extraordinary, she managed. I know. Ryan. Her voice was rough now at the edges, all the professional finish worn through. I don't know what the right answer is tomorrow. I want to be honest with you about that. I know what Harrington wants. I know what the safe move is. But I also know... She stopped. I know what I want. And those 2 things are not the same. What do you want? He asked. Quiet. Direct. The same question he'd asked her in the elevator in the amber light when she'd told him the truth about the quiet apartment and the dinner alone. I want to stop making decisions based on what's safe. Her voice steadied. I want to stop letting him set the terms of my life. Another pause. And I want to know that whatever I decide tomorrow, you're okay. I'm okay. Ryan, I'm telling you the truth. I'm okay. I've been through harder than this, and I've gotten up and made breakfast and packed a school bag, and I'm still here. He paused. You don't have to protect me. Not from this. I know I don't have to. She let that settle. I want to. Silence again. The city outside her window. The city outside his apartment window, 7 floors up a neighborhood that cost a fraction of hers, full of people who were invisible in all the same ways he was. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "I'll try. Whatever you decide tomorrow, it's your decision, not his. Remember that." She held the phone for a moment after they hung up. Then she set it on the desk. Looked at the files in front of her. Looked at the city. Looked at the door to the outer office where Patricia would be gone for the night, where the building was quiet and efficient and indifferent, where everything kept running, whether she was okay or not. She picked up her pen, pulled a notepad toward her. She wrote 2 columns. On the left, everything Harrington wanted. On the right, everything she actually believed. She sat with both columns for a long time. Then she crossed out the left side entirely. She had her answer. She just needed to figure out how to deliver it in a room full of people who were betting she wouldn't. The board consultation was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the main conference room on 32nd. Victoria arrived at 7:12, same as always, and went directly to her office. Patricia was already there. "You decided," Patricia said. She could tell immediately. "I decided. What should I know?" "Prepare the operational data from the last 18 months. Performance metrics, client retention, revenue growth, restructure, timeline. I want everything that shows what this leadership has delivered. Clean, clear sourced." She set her bag down. "And pull the Morrison infrastructure report." Patricia paused. "The one Ryan Whitmore prepared." "The same. It's the most comprehensive operational analysis we have on that carrier situation. I want it in the room." Patricia didn't comment on that. She was too good at her job to comment on that. "Anything else?" "Get me a coffee, and Patricia." She stopped her at the door. "Whatever happens in that room today, thank you. For 4 years, you've protected me from things I didn't even know were coming. I want you to know I see that." Patricia looked at her for a moment. "I know you do," she said. "That's why I've stayed." She nodded once. "Coffee in 10 minutes. The board began filing in at 8:50. 12 people around a table that was designed to project authority, wide, dark, immovable. Richard Harrington arrived at 8:58 and sat at the far end from Victoria's position, which told her everything about how he planned to run the morning. You don't sit that far from someone when you want a conversation. You sit that far when you want an arena. Howe was 63 years old, thick in the shoulders, with the particular confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone without financial leverage over him. He'd been on this board since Victoria was in graduate school. He'd watched her father build the company. He'd voted to install her when Edward Ashford died because he'd believed Victoria now understood completely that grief would make her manageable. He'd been calculating ever since. She let him open. That was deliberate. She'd learned from her father, let the other person show you their hand before you show yours. Let them commit to a position. "I think we're all aware of why we're here." Harrington's voice carried the practiced ease of a man who'd run 1,000 rooms. "There's been a situation that requires the board's attention. A relationship between our CEO and a junior employee that raises questions about judgment, about professional boundaries, and about the kind of leadership culture we want to model for this organization." He placed the photograph on the table. "Printed," which meant he'd gone through the deliberate effort of printing it. Victoria looked at it without expression. "I want to be clear," Harrington continued, "that this isn't about the personal lives of either individual involved. This is about what this image communicates to our stakeholders, our clients, and our employees. It communicates that the standards we expect from our workforce don't apply to the top floor. And that is a problem." Around the table faces arranged themselves carefully, the particular blankness of people who haven't decided yet which way the wind is going. Victoria let him finish, waited 2 full beats. Then she opened the folder in front of her. 18 months, she said. That's how long I've been running this company through what the quarterly models politely call a transition period, and what the rest of us know was a restructure in the middle of grief during a market contraction with a board that was not unanimous in its confidence. She slid a single-page summary to the center of the table. In 18 months, client retention is up 11%. Revenue growth has exceeded projection in 3 consecutive quarters. The Northeast Logistics restructure, which has been questioned at this table, is on track to deliver 14% cost reduction without eliminating a single hub, which means we retain the redundancy that protects our clients during disruptions. She paused. That last piece came from a ground-level operational analysis conducted by someone who understood the real infrastructure better than the consultants we paid $200,000. She placed the Morrison report on the table. Ryan Whitmore's name was on the header. Harrington's eyes went to it. The analysis that potentially saved us a catastrophic single point of failure exposure. Victoria continued, was written by a logistics assistant who had the knowledge, the professional integrity, and the willingness to tell me what was actually true instead of what looked good in a presentation. She looked around the table. Now, Richard wants to frame a photograph of two people standing in an elevator as a leadership crisis. I'd like to offer a different frame. Victoria Harrington's voice had an edge now. I'm not finished. She said it pleasantly. She'd been waiting to say that sentence to this man for 2 years. The frame I'd like to offer is this. What you see in that photograph is a CEO who stopped treating people in this building as background, who chose to have real conversations with the people who actually understand how this operation functions, who found in the process someone with more operational insight than most of the senior staff in this building. That is not a compromise of judgment. That is judgment. She let it land. The only crisis here is Richard's disappointment that I'm not easier to control than he planned. The room went very quiet. Harrington's expression didn't collapse because he was too experienced for that. But something shifted behind his eyes, the recalibration of a man who'd walked into a room expecting a certain kind of opponent and found a different one. That's a serious accusation, he said. It's an accurate one, and everyone in this room knows it. She looked around the table, not with aggression, but with the calm of someone who has decided to stop managing other people's discomfort. You've all watched Richard operate for years. You know how he works. You've benefited from it when it served you and tolerated it when it didn't. I'm asking you to look at what he's actually doing today, taking a photograph of a power failure in an elevator and turning it into a governance crisis, and decide whether that's the kind of board this company deserves. The silence held. Then, Margaret O.C., who'd been on the board for 7 years and who almost never spoke until she had something definitive to say, leaned forward. What specifically is the conflict of interest being alleged? Her voice was precise and unhurried. The photograph shows proximity. It doesn't show a decision. What business decision has Victoria made that was influenced inappropriately by this relationship? Harrington looked at her. The relationship itself represents. That's not what I asked. What decision, specifically? Another board member, Thomas Ewan, Finance, shifted in his chair. The Northeast restructure analysis is on the table, and it appears to represent exactly the kind of ground-level input we've been lacking. That's not compromised judgment. That's good process. The optics, Harrington tried. Richard. Margaret O.C.'s voice was kind, in a way that managed to also be entirely firm. Optics require an audience with a concern. Our clients don't know about a photograph in an elevator. Our stakeholders don't know. The only people with a concern here are sitting in this room. A pause. So whose concern is this actually? Harrington looked around the table. Did the math. Did it again. Victoria watched him do it. She watched the moment he understood that the room hadn't arranged itself the way he'd expected. She watched him recalibrate, not retreat, because men like Harrington didn't retreat, but reposition. I want the board to go on record that we've addressed the situation, he said. Whatever the outcome of today's discussion, there should be a formal note in the minutes that the matter was raised and reviewed. Raised, reviewed, and found without merit, Margaret said. She looked at Victoria. I'd like to call for a confidence vote, formal, on record. Victoria held her expression neutral. Inside something that had been wound very tight for 24 hours, loosened by a single degree. The vote was 9-3. 9-3 in her favor. Harrington gathered his folder when it was done and left without the extended small talk he usually deployed. The room emptied in layers, some people stopping to say a word to Victoria, others moving quickly with the discomfort of people who'd almost made a different choice. Thomas Ewan stopped at the door. He was a careful, quiet man, an actuary by training, which meant he spent his professional life thinking about risk. "The Whitmore analysis on Morrison," he said. "It's solid work. I know. He should be doing more than logistics coordination." "I know that too." Thomas nodded. Left. Patricia was in the hallway. She didn't say anything. She handed Victoria a fresh coffee, fell into step beside her, and walked her back to the office without commentary, which was the most eloquent thing she could have done. It was 10:43 when Victoria closed her office door, sat down, put both hands flat on the desk, and breathed for the first time since 7:12 that morning. She picked up her phone, called Ryan. It rang 4 times. She thought it would go to voicemail. "Hey," slightly breathless, like he'd moved quickly to pick up. "Are you at your desk?" "Loading dock. Hold on." Sounds of movement. A door. Relative quiet. "Okay, what happened?" 9-3. Silence. 9-3 in my favor, she said. She heard him exhale a long, controlled breath that told her exactly how much he'd been holding that morning. "You're okay," he said. "I'm okay." "Victoria." He stopped, started again. I've been carrying my phone all morning." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just..." Another breath. 9-3. Margaret Osei asked him to name a specific business decision I'd made that was compromised. He couldn't do it. Because there wasn't one. Because there wasn't one. She paused. "Thomas Ewan said your Morrison analysis was solid work. He thinks you should be doing more than logistics coordination." Quiet on the line. "He said that, directly, to my face, after a formal confidence vote in my favor." She let that sit for a moment. "You've been invisible in this building for 2 years, Ryan. That ends today." He didn't answer immediately. She could hear the particular quality of a man sitting with something he'd heard but not yet fully absorbed. "I don't want..." He stopped. "I don't want anything because of you. I need you to know that. Anything that changes it has to be because of the work. It is because of the work you did, that nobody asked you to do, and that you did anyway because you saw what needed to be done." Her voice was firm. "This isn't a favor. Don't you dare frame it as a favor." Another pause. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." Silence that was not empty. "Lily's going to need to know at some point," he said, "that my friend from work is more than that." "I know. I've been thinking about how to do it. She asked me again this morning. She said..." He stopped. She could hear the smile in it before he said the next part. "She said, 'Daddy is your friend at work, someone who could come to my dinosaur presentation.' Because she has a school presentation in 3 weeks, about prehistoric ecosystems, and apparently she wants a larger audience." Victoria sat completely still for a moment. "A larger audience," she repeated. "She made a poster. It has very detailed illustrations of ankylosaurs." "Ryan?" "Yeah." "Tell her yes." A pause. "Tell her?" Victoria's voice caught on something, and she let it catch, didn't smooth it over because Ryan would hear the smoothing, and she was done smoothing things over. "Tell her I would be honored to see the ankylosaur illustrations." He was quiet for a moment that felt full rather than empty. "She's going to talk to you for 3 hours about prehistoric ecosystems." "Good. I have a lot to learn." He laughed. The real laugh she'd come to know it, the difference between the polite version and the one that came from somewhere genuine. This was the real one. "I have to get back," he said. "Loading dock won't manage itself." "Go." "Victoria." "Yeah." "Well done today." She looked at the city outside her window. The same city it had always been, full of invisible people living real lives. She thought about her father, who knew every driver's name, who said a company was only as good as the ones nobody thinks to thank. "I had help," she said. She meant the Morrison report. She meant Margaret Osei's precise question. She meant Thomas Ewan's assessment at the door. She also meant something else, and they both knew it. What happened next was not a straight line. That was the part that nobody's version of this story ever quite captured when it spread through the building. In the following days, the part where neither of them floated upward into some smooth, untroubled version of happily ever after. Real things didn't work that way. Real things moved like the water cycle. Lily was studying evaporation accumulation release. All of it connected, none of it simple. Harrington didn't disappear. He was still on the board. He was still patient, still calculating, still waiting for the next angle. The vote had been a defeat, not a surrender, and men like that treated defeats as educational. The photograph still circulated in the lower levels of the company, muted now drained of most of its charge by the board's vote, but present. People still whispered. People would whisper for a while. Ryan's role at the company did begin to change, but slowly, properly, in the way that legitimate things changed through a restructure proposal that Victoria put in front of operations 2 weeks after the board meeting, creating a new position called Senior Operations Analyst that came with a real salary and a real scope, and was posted through proper channels, and which Ryan applied for, along with 4 other candidates, and which he got, because his interview was 15 minutes of precise, sourced, confident operational analysis that made the hiring panel take notes. Marcus found out about the promotion before Ryan could tell him. He appeared at Ryan's desk with 2 coffees and the expression of a man who had feelings he was going to handle through sarcasm. Senior Operations Analyst. It was a competitive process. You're unbelievable. It was a legitimately competitive. Ryan. Marcus set the coffee down. His voice lost the sarcasm. His actual face appeared underneath it, the face of a man who had been genuinely worried about his friend for weeks and was now experiencing something close to relief. I'm proud of you. That's what I'm saying. I'm just going to need a minute to say it without being weird about it. Take your time. I'm proud of you. He said it straight. You didn't play it safe. You didn't stay invisible when it would have been easier. And it turned out. He gestured vaguely at the general situation. Like this. It hasn't turned out yet, Ryan said. We're still in the middle. But you're still standing. Yeah. Ryan wrapped his hands around the coffee. I'm still standing. It was 3 days before Lily's dinosaur presentation that Victoria drove herself, not the company car, not the driver, to a small Italian restaurant 6 blocks from Ryan's apartment, because he'd asked her to dinner, and she'd said yes, and the asking and the yes had both been so uncomplicated, so matter-of-fact, that it had almost moved her to tears in the middle of a Wednesday. She was 10 minutes early. She sat at the table and looked at the menu and tried to remember the last time she'd sat in a restaurant and not been working or performing or managing something. She couldn't quite locate the memory. He came through the door at exactly 7. No jacket. The November evening was cold, and he'd clearly prioritized efficiency over formality. He spotted her immediately and crossed the room, and she watched him move through the restaurant with the specific awareness of someone who has been paying attention to a person long enough to know exactly how they carry themselves. He sat across from her. You're early, he said. I'm always early. I know. I came early too. He nodded at the water glass in front of him, which a server had already placed. They seated you 10 minutes ago. Were you watching? I was around the corner collecting myself. She raised her eyebrows slightly. You needed to collect yourself. I've been looking forward to this for 2 weeks. It warranted collecting. He picked up his menu, looked at it, looked at her over the top of it. You look different. Different how? You're not wearing the armor. She glanced down at herself. She was wearing what she'd wear anywhere. Anywhere, nothing special about it. Nothing that should read as armor-free. Then she understood he didn't mean clothes. I left it in the car, she said. Good. They ordered. They ate. They talked for 3 hours without once discussing logistics or board votes or Harrington or organizational structure. They talked about her father's early company and the drivers whose names he knew. They talked about Ryan's sister Dana and the 4-hour drive she'd made to sit in his kitchen after his wife died. They talked about the specific education of raising a child alone, what it taught you about patience, about presence, about what actually mattered when you stripped everything else away. She told him about the year she'd spent in Tokyo after graduate school, working for a firm she'd hated in a city she'd loved, and the exact moment she'd understood that the career she was building and the life she wanted were not the same path. He told her about the night 2 years into working at Ashford Technologies when he'd sat in his car in the parking structure and thought, this is not enough. And then gone home and watched Lily sleep and thought, but this is everything. You stayed, she said. I stayed, because she needed stable, and stable meant keeping the job I had. And now, he looked at her. Now stable looks a little different. She held his gaze. Outside the restaurant, the city moved through its November evening cold, lit up indifferent to the specific things happening inside this particular room at this particular table. I'm not easy, she said. I want you to know that going in. I work too much and I forget to eat, and I have a board member who is going to spend the next year looking for another angle. My schedule is... She shook her head. It's a lot. I have a 6-year-old who wakes up coughing at 2 a.m. and asks me to quiz her on prehistoric marine reptiles at 7 p.m., and who is going to have very specific opinions about every person I bring into her life. He paused. We're both a lot. Yes. I'm not looking for easy. She looked at him for a long moment. What are you looking for? He thought about it the way he thought about everything genuinely without performance. Someone who makes dinner feel like something worth sitting down for, he said. She felt that somewhere specific. Somewhere that had been quiet for a very long time. She picked up her glass. Tell me more about the dinosaur presentation, she said. His whole face changed. Not dramatically, just the way a person's face changes when they arrive at the thing they love most. He told her about this poster. About the color-coded ecosystem map. About Lily's theory regarding the migratory patterns of ankylosaurs in relation to vegetation density and its parallels with modern wildlife behavior. He told her about the serious expression Lily got when she was explaining something important, and the way she'd practiced her presentation 3 times in the living room with Ryan, as her only audience, correcting him when he asked questions she considered insufficiently rigorous. Victoria laughed through most of it. The real laugh all the way through, not catching herself once. When they walked out into the November cold, he held the door for her, not as a performance, just as a natural thing, and they stood on the sidewalk in that specific moment of an evening that hasn't ended yet, but is about to, both of them aware of it. Thank you, she said. For dinner. Thank you for coming. She looked at him. He looked at her. The city moved around them. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she confirmed. The presentation. She started to turn. Stopped. Ryan? Yeah. In the elevator. She met his eyes. When I asked you how much more luck you thought you needed. I remember. I've been thinking about it since. She held his gaze. I don't think it was luck. What happened between then and now? I don't think either of us was lucky. He waited. I think we were just paying attention, she said. At the right moment, to the right things. He looked at her with that steadiness she'd come to count on, the particular steadiness of a man who had sat on bathroom floors and parking lots and the edge of a 6-year-old's bed in the dark and come out the other side, still fundamentally himself. Yeah, he said. I think that's right. She nodded once, turned, walked toward her car. She made it about 15 steps before she heard him call her name. She turned. He was still standing where she'd left him, hands in his pockets, the November cold making his breath visible. Saturday, he said. After the presentation. If Lily approves of you, and she will, because she has excellent judgment, I want to take you both for ice cream. Victoria stood on the sidewalk in the November cold, and felt something move through her chest, warm and specific and completely untranslatable into professional language. What if she has questions, she said, about prehistoric ecosystems? She will absolutely have questions, many of them. I'll do my research. Don't. She'd rather teach you. She likes being the expert. Victoria thought about a 6-year-old girl who ate burnt toast without complaining because she didn't want her father to feel bad. Who asked if his friends were nice to him? Who offered to draw a triceratops on a card for someone she'd never met because she'd decided it was the most comforting dinosaur? Who had, by some extraordinary chain of luck and attention, and a reckless joke in an elevator, become the reason? Victoria Ashford was standing on a sidewalk in November, feeling something she hadn't felt in longer than she could accurately measure. Saturday, she said. He smiled. She turned and walked to her car. This time he let her go. She drove home, rode up the elevator to her apartment, walked to the window, same city, same view. She'd stood at on 100 nights when the quiet felt too heavy. She stood there for a while. Then she went to the kitchen, made herself tea, sat down at the table, not standing at the counter, and drank it slowly. The apartment was quiet. But for the first time in longer than she could measure, the quiet didn't feel like absence. It felt like the pause before something. She sat with it. And for once, she didn't reach for her phone. Didn't open the laptop. Didn't fill the space with the next thing that needed doing. She just sat there in her quiet apartment, in her quiet life, and let herself feel the specific shape of what was coming, uncertain, complicated, inconvenient, completely real, and entirely worth it. Saturday arrived, the way important days sometimes do, quietly, without announcing itself, dressed in ordinary clothes. Ryan was up at 6. Not because the alarm went off, not because Lily was coughing, because he'd slept lightly all night with the particular alertness of someone who has something to look forward to and doesn't entirely trust himself not to oversleep it. He made coffee, stood at the kitchen window while the city woke up below him, thought about the day ahead with the careful, deliberate attention he gave to things that mattered. Lily appeared at 6:47 in her dinosaur pajamas, hair in full chaos, dragging her stuffed triceratops by one leg. Is today the day? Today's the day. She climbed onto the kitchen stool and looked at him with the solemn focus of someone about to undertake something significant. What if she doesn't like dinosaurs? She's been doing research. Lily's eyes went wide. She researched. She told me she wanted to be prepared. Lily sat with this information for a moment, processing it with the gravity it deserved. She researched, she repeated. Not a question this time, a verdict. She did. Okay. Lily nodded firmly, as though something important had been settled. She can come. Ryan turned back to the coffee, so Lily wouldn't see him smile. The presentation was at 11. Lily had been assigned the Prehistoric Ecosystems module for her class's science fair, and she had over the previous 3 weeks produced what Ryan could only describe as a masterwork, a trifold poster that combined detailed hand-drawn illustrations with printed data charts and a color-coded timeline of Earth's biological history that she had designed herself based on a documentary she'd watched 4 times. She had rehearsed the presentation 12 times in the living room. Ryan had been her audience for 11 of those rehearsals. He'd learned a great deal about ankylosaurs. Victoria arrived at the school at 10:55. Ryan saw her from across the gymnasium. She was in jeans and a dark green sweater. No armor exactly as he'd hoped. And she was looking around the room with the expression of someone who was genuinely uncertain what they were walking into and had decided to be okay with that. He crossed the gym to meet her. You came, he said. I said I would. I know, He stopped. I'm glad you're here. She looked at him for a moment. Where is she? He nodded toward the far table where Lily was standing next to her poster, talking with her teacher, gesturing with the focused authority of a scientist at a conference. Victoria looked at Lily for a long moment. He watched her watched something in her face move through several things before settling somewhere quiet and genuine. She's exactly how I imagined her, Victoria said softly. How did you imagine her? Like you, but louder. He laughed. That's accurate. He brought Victoria over. Lily looked up from her teacher conversation and fixed Victoria with the direct evaluating gaze of a child who has been thinking about this moment and intends to conduct it properly. You're Victoria, Lily said. I am. You must be Lily. I've been expecting you. She said it with complete seriousness. Then she pointed at the poster. Do you know about ankylosaurs? I know they were armored, Victoria said, matching her tone exactly. And that they had a tail club they used for defense. And that they were herbivores, which some people find surprising given the armor. Lily stared at her. I did research, Victoria said. Lily turned to look at Ryan with an expression he recognized, the one that meant she had encountered something that met or exceeded her standards. She researched, Lily said. I told you. Lily turned back to Victoria. squared her shoulders, pointed to the first panel of her poster. Okay, I'll start from the beginning. Victoria pulled up a small folding chair, sat down directly in front of the poster, and gave Lily her complete and genuine attention. Not the managed attention of someone performing interest. The real kind. The kind that asked follow-up questions, that leaned forward, that said, "Wait, explain that part again." When Lily described the relationship between vegetation density and ankylosaur migration patterns, Ryan stood to the side and watched. He watched Victoria ask Lily what she thought happened to the ankylosaurs during the mass extinction, and he watched Lily explain her theory with the passionate certainty of someone who has done extensive research and arrived at a confident conclusion. He watched Victoria listen to every word. He watched Lily notice that she was being listened to, really listened to, and the way that landed on her, the way she stood slightly taller. 35 minutes later, Lily finished. She looked at Victoria expectantly. "That," Victoria said, "is the most comprehensive and well-organized scientific presentation I have seen in recent memory, and I sit through a great many presentations." Lily beamed. "I made all the illustrations myself. They're exceptional. The ankylosaur detail is remarkable. Do you want to see my notes?" Lily was already reaching under the table for a folder. "I have supporting data." Ryan stepped forward. "Lily, maybe let Victoria breathe for a second." "No." Victoria looked at him briefly, then back at Lily. "I want to see the notes." Lily produced the folder with the triumphant energy of a scientist whose work is finally receiving appropriate attention. Victoria took it, opened it, read through it with genuine interest while Lily narrated from beside her. Ryan watched the two of them, his daughter and this woman who'd walked into his life through a stopped elevator and a stupid joke, and felt something he recognized from a conversation a long time ago in a parking lot, when he'd sat in his car, unable to go upstairs, because he couldn't locate the version of his life that came next. He thought he could see it now. I didn't say that. He just stood there in a school gymnasium on a Saturday morning watching his daughter explain her supporting data to a woman who was genuinely reading every page, and he held the moment, the way you hold something that you know, even while it's happening, that you will want to remember. The ice cream after was Lily's choice. A place 3 blocks from the school that she described as having the best cookies and cream in the known universe. A claim she stood behind with full conviction. They walked there. Lily held Ryan's hand on one side, and after approximately 90 seconds of consideration, held Victoria's on the other. Victoria looked down at the small hand in hers, looked up at Ryan over Lily's head. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They sat in the ice cream place for 2 hours. Lily talked most of it about school, about her friend Maya, who had also done a good presentation, but about weather patterns, which Lily considered a less interesting topic, about a book she'd started about deep ocean ecosystems, about whether when she grew up she wanted to be a paleontologist or a marine biologist, or possibly both. "Can you be both?" she asked Victoria directly. "You can be whatever combination of things you decide to be," Victoria said. "The job title is just the label. The work is what matters." Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "My dad says something like that." "Your dad is usually right. He burns the toast sometimes." "Everyone has a weakness." Lily giggled. The real kind belly laugh, spoon waving. Ryan caught Victoria's eye across the table, and she was already smiling the real smile all the way through. On the walk back, Lily ran ahead the way children run when they've been sitting long enough and their bodies remember that running is an option, and Ryan and Victoria walked behind her at the pace of people with nowhere urgent to be. "She approved of me," Victoria said. "Not quite a question. She held your hand for 2 hours. Is that the metric? That's the highest metric." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Lily looped back to them, reported that she had spotted a dog ahead that she intended to greet, and ran off again. "Ryan." Victoria kept her eyes on Lily running ahead. "I want to say something, and I need you to let me say it without interrupting." "Okay. I have spent 12 years building a version of myself that was sufficient for every room I walked into. Competent, controlled, prepared. I got very good at it." She paused. "And I forgot somewhere in those 12 years that sufficient and alive are not the same thing." She looked at him then. "You reminded me." Not with a speech. Not by trying to. Just by being you. Honest and steady, and the kind of person who sits on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning holding his daughter because that's what she needs. He held her gaze. She exhaled. I wanted to say it out loud, while we were here, while she was running ahead and the day was still. She gestured vaguely at the ordinary, extraordinary Saturday around them. I hear you, he said quietly. Good. Lily came running back with a full report on the dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, 3 years old, exceptionally friendly, and took up her position between them without ceremony, and they walked the rest of the way back with her narrating the Biscuit encounter in comprehensive detail, and neither Ryan nor Victoria said anything more about what had just passed between them. They didn't need to. The following weeks moved with the particular rhythm of things that are real, rather than performed, sometimes smooth, sometimes complicated, always worth it. Harrington filed a formal minority opinion about the board vote with the company's governance records, which was his right, and which everyone understood was his way of keeping a marker on the table. Ryan's transition to senior operations analyst took effect the first of the month. He moved to a different office, still not 32. Nowhere close, but a real desk in a real department, with a title that reflected what he'd always been capable of. Marcus sent him a text when the announcement went through the company system. Told you. Also, I am available to say I told you so in person at any time. Ryan replied, I know. Also, yes. He went back to the lower logistics office on his first day in the new role and spent 20 minutes at his old desk just sitting there. The cardboard smell. The printer toner. The microwave that still didn't work. Marcus was on a call and raised a coffee cup in salute without breaking his conversation. Ryan sat in that chair one more time and took stock of 2 years. Everything he'd learned there. Everything he'd seen that no one above him had thought to ask about. The Morrison analysis. The Northeast restructure. The 100 small things he'd fixed quietly and without credit, because fixing them was the job and he was good at it. I thought about his father-in-law, who'd told him at his wife's funeral in the specific gruffness of a man who didn't know how to say tender things, that she'd always been proud of him. That she'd told her father more than once that Ryan was the kind of man who showed up. Not just when it was convenient. Always. He'd carried that. All 3 years. On the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., and in the parking lot, and at the kitchen counter eating standing up. He'd carried it because it was true, and because on the days when he couldn't locate any other reason to keep moving, it was enough. He stood up from the old chair, said goodbye to Marcus, who ended his call specifically to say in person the 3 words Ryan already knew were coming. I told you, Marcus said. You told me. They shook hands. The handshake turned into a brief embrace that neither of them commented on. Ryan went to his new desk. He showed up. The first time Victoria met Dana, Ryan's sister, it was accidental. Dana had driven in, unannounced on a Sunday. In December, she did this periodically, which Ryan accepted as one of the fixed conditions of having a sister who loved him with a car full of groceries, specific opinions about Ryan's refrigerator situation, and the kind of energy that immediately reorganized whatever room she walked into. She came through the apartment door, put 3 bags on the counter, said, "Your vegetable drawer is a crime scene," without looking up, and then looked up. Victoria was sitting at the kitchen table with Lily. Both of them bent over what appeared to be a collaborative drawing project. Dana looked at Victoria, looked at Ryan, looked back at Victoria, looked at Lily, who looked up and said with complete normalcy, "Aunt Dana, this is Victoria. She knows about ankylosaurs." Dana set down the 4th grocery bag very carefully. "Does she?" Dana said. "She did research," Lily confirmed. Then went back to the drawing. Dana looked at Ryan with the expression of a woman who has 4 hours of driving ahead of her and has just discovered that the visit she thought was a routine check-in is in fact a completely different kind of visit. Ryan mouthed, "I'll explain." Dana mouthed back, "You will explain everything." She stayed for dinner. Ryan actually cooked not eggs a real meal, because Dana had restocked his refrigerator to operational status, and there was no longer any excuse. Victoria set the table. Lily provided running commentary on everything. Dana sat at the counter and watched all of it with the focused attention of a woman who loves her brother and is taking inventory. After dinner, after Lily was in bed, Dana and Victoria ended up at the kitchen table with wine while Ryan did the dishes, a dynamic that established itself naturally and that Ryan suspected was not accidental on Dana's part. He couldn't hear everything they said. He caught pieces. Dana's voice direct, warm, with the particular frankness of someone who has earned the right to it. Victoria's voice measured at first, then loosening. The sound of Dana laughing, which meant Victoria had said something real. At some point, Dana said loud enough that Ryan could hear from the sink, "He burned the toast this morning, didn't he?" And Victoria said, "Lily warned me. She said it was his only weakness." "It's not his only weakness," Dana said. "But it's the one he'll admit to." Ryan turned around. Both of them were looking at him. "I'm right here," he said. "We know," Dana said pleasantly. Victoria looked at him across the kitchen with the specific look of a person who is exactly where they want to be. He dried his hands, sat back down at the table. Dana stayed until 10. At the door, she hugged Ryan for longer than usual, one of those hugs that carries a message, and then she looked at him and said quietly enough that only he could hear, "She looks at you the way Claire used to." He held that carefully. "I know," he said. Dana nodded, squeezed his arm, walked out. He stood in the doorway for a moment after her car turned the corner. The December night was cold and clear. He stood there breathing it in. Victoria appeared beside him. She'd gotten her coat. She was heading home. "Your sister is wonderful," she said. "She's relentless." "That's what I mean." She looked out at the night. "She loves you without conditions. That's rare. She drove 4 hours after my wife died to sit in my kitchen and tell me I was allowed to be a person again someday. She was right." "I know." He looked at her. "It just took me a while to believe it." Victoria looked at him steadily. The December air moved between them. From inside the apartment, very faint, the sound of Lily shifting in her sleep, one of those small sounds that parents learn to hear through walls. "I should go," Victoria said. "Yeah." She didn't move immediately. He didn't make her. "Ryan." She met his eyes. "That morning in the elevator, when you said that ridiculous thing." "Which I will never fully explain." "I know, but—" The corner of her mouth moved. "I've been thinking about what I said back. How much more luck do you think you need?" "I remember." "I think I was wrong," she said. "I don't think it was luck either. Not for either of us." She paused. "I think we were two people who were exhausted and invisible and moving through their days on discipline alone, and we happened to be in the same small space at the right moment, and we both—" She stopped, found the word. "Paid attention. That's what you said on the sidewalk after dinner." "I meant it then too." She held his gaze. "I'm going to keep meaning it." He stepped forward, closed the distance, and he kissed her, not for luck, not as a joke, not as a consequence of anything except choosing to. She kissed him back with the uncomplicated certainty of someone who has made a decision and is done second-guessing it. When they stepped back, the December night was exactly the same as it had been 30 seconds before. The city was unchanged. The stars, what few were visible through the light pollution, were where they'd always been. Everything was the same. Everything was completely different. "Saturday?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were warm. "Saturday," he confirmed. She walked to her car. He stood in the doorway and watched her go, the same way he watched the bus with Lily every morning, making sure the important thing made it safely where it was going. When her taillights turned the corner, he went back inside. The apartment was quiet. Lily was asleep. The kitchen still smelled like dinner. Dana's reorganized refrigerator hummed with uncharacteristic competence. Ryan's jacket was on the hook by the door, and Lily's backpack was under it, packed for Monday water bottle in the front pocket. Permission slip he'd almost forgotten twice already tucked into the main compartment. He stood in the middle of the kitchen and looked at the ordinary evidence of his life, the packed bag, and the refrigerator, and the drawings Lily had left on the table, one of which was labeled in her careful 6-year-old handwriting, Ankylosaur for Victoria, and he felt the full weight of everything it had taken to get here. The bathroom floor at 2 a.m., the parking lot, the standing at the counter eating toast he should have been sitting down for, 2 years of invisibility in a building that didn't know his name, a blister on his right heel from running in the wrong shoes, a joke in an elevator that he still couldn't fully explain. He sat down at the kitchen table, picked up Lily's drawing, looked at the ankylosaur carefully rendered in green and brown crayon, armored and solid, and per Lily's extensive research more significant than people gave it credit for. For Victoria. In careful letters. From Lily. And then added below in slightly smaller print, clearly an afterthought that had felt important. It is the most comforting dinosaur. Ryan sat at his kitchen table on a December night, and he laughed the real kind, the one that comes from somewhere so deep, it catches you off guard, and then he held the drawing carefully. The way you hold something small, that is also somehow enormous, and the apartment was quiet around him, and the city moved outside, and his daughter breathed evenly behind the wall, and everything he had built from nothing, everything he had protected through the long years of being alone, sat solid and real and completely his. The next morning, he woke before the alarm, made coffee, made eggs without burning them. He concentrated. It was not that difficult. Packed Lily's bag, stood at the bus stop in the December cold while she climbed the steps and turned at the top, both hands waving with total commitment, flagging him down from the ordinary miracle of her daily departure. He waved back, watched the bus until it turned the corner, turned around, walked back toward a life that was finally completely, entirely his own. Not the stripped-down survival version, not the invisible version, not the version he'd accepted because it was what remained after loss had taken its share. The full version. The one where he sat down to eat and laughed without catching himself, and walked into rooms that didn't know his name, and said what he knew to be true anyway. The version where the most comforting dinosaur sat on a refrigerator in a kitchen where people showed up for each other. He went to work. He did the job. He told the truth about what he saw. He came home. And that all of it together, ordinary and extraordinary and entirely earned, was more than enough. It was everything. It was precisely, completely the life he had always deserved to be living. And from this point forward, he intended to live it without apology, without invisibility, and without ever once looking back.